Hey, Average Joes. Welcome to the Average Joes podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to give a big shout out to this episode's sponsor. Today's show is brought to you by Bruton Supply in Tompkinsville, Kentucky, the original place to save since 1958. Whether you're fixing up the house, tackling a farm project, or needing reliable appliances, plumbing supplies, tools, or building materials, Bruton's has you covered with quality products and that old-fashioned friendly service you just don't get at the big box stores. I've stopped by myself, and I always walk out with exactly what I need. If you're in South Central Kentucky or nearby, swing by Bruton Supply at 215 West 3rd Street in Tompkinsville, Kentucky, or give them a call at 270-487-5966, or check them out online at brutonsupply.com. Big thanks to Bruton Supply for supporting the show. We love you, Doc. All right, let's get into today's episode. Okay.
I think we caught a glitch is what it is.
That's okay.
All right.
No worries at all. I do apologize if there was anything on my end, but it's technology, man.
No, man, really. All right. So So I got you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit. And like I said, this is more of a hobby for me, but I just as a therapist, I like talking to people. And
Sure.
I feel like a podcast is a great way to do that as a hobby. So, and a lot of people have great stories to tell, great things to share. So, and I understand that you've either written or you're writing a book. Is that correct?
Written my first novel, which is called Strawberry Concrete.
Okay. Yep. I have that. And how long has that been out?
It's been out since about November 5th.
Okay.
It was originally released in 2020, and then so it was out for a while, and then the publisher went under.
Right.
I got my rights back, and it's based on my uncle was a Secret Service agent under Kennedy and Johnson, and he had started with Austin Police Department. And when Kennedy was killed, he was in Austin on the advance team. So he grew up in Austin, Texas, and he knew Lyndon Johnson, and Lyndon Johnson knew him, and they didn't get along. So Johnson wasn't going anywhere. So he left, and he went back to work for Austin Police Department. And he was in Austin in 1966 when a Marine by the name of Charles Whitman went up to the top of the University of Texas bell tower with a rifle and ended up killing a lot of folks. And my uncle was a crime scene investigator on that.
And so this was your uncle in both scenarios?
In both scenarios, yes. And then in 1972, he had gone back federal, and he was working with the Treasury Department. It's when he originally started with the Secret Service. And he was in New Orleans in 1962, 63, when there was a sailor by the name of Mark Essex who went on a rampage in New Orleans, ended up shooting, I think, 4 New Orleans police officers. They tracked him to a Howard Johnson's hotel, and he went through the hotel, firing shots, setting fires, then barricaded himself on the roof, and then started sniping up there. Yep. So I kind of say he's kind of like Forrest Gump, except when he shows up, people die.
That's wild that he was so near to those situations.
Right.
I'm very interested in learning more about that. So, but I want to get kind of what you would like to do. Personally, I'm interested in those stories, but I know that you want to get your book, you want to get that out there too, I would assume. And so what would you like to focus on? Are you there? Nope. There you are.
Okay. I just switched to another network. So you're interested in what the book or what my uncle was involved in?
I'm interested in the things that your uncle was involved in, but I also I know that you would want to get your book out there as well. So I just wanted to see what your priority is and go from there.
Well, I've written 4 books so far. The next one that's coming out is called Not Alone in the Fire, and it's about a terrorist bombing in a mall, but it's more of a spiritual battle sort of thing, where you have, I don't know if you're familiar with Frank Peretti. Frank Peretti he's a Christian author, and a couple of his books called Piercing the Darkness and This Present Darkness were about spiritual battles.
Okay.
And I kind of took that idea. So you have the investigation of the bombing of the mall, but you have angelic forces and demonic forces that are fighting for control of this town and this mall in particular, as kind of a starting point to take over.
For sure. Yeah. And I think you had sent me that or a link to that. I think, and because what you're describing is very familiar now that you're talking about it. So that's the one you're working on now.
So it is at the publisher, and it should be out by the first of the year. And then there are two books. There, the Unkindest Cut of All, book 1, The Rise of the Barber, and book 2, Return of the Barber. They are about a 16-year search for a serial killer in Louisiana. Now, I started in Baton Rouge. I grew up in Louisiana. I worked with the sheriff's office for about 10 years and was a crime scene investigator, and ended up working a case that was tied to, at the time, we didn't know because this was late 80s. So we didn't have DNA, and we didn't have a lot of the technology that you have now. So it wasn't until after I left that I was contacted about this case I had worked that they believe was tied to one of the serial killers that we had. Actually, Baton Rouge had 2 that were working. They had Derek Todd Lee, who did approximately 18 homicides, and then we had Sean Gillis, who did about 13, and mine was one of his. So it was a case that I had worked, and it wasn't solved. So even after we believed that he was involved in it, he never confessed to it. And at the time when we found the victim, there was not really anything that evidentially, I can't say the word, but evidence-wise, tied him to it other than the proximity and the MO. So this victim fit the MO of his. So it's still considered an open case, but kind of behind the scenes, we know that he did it.
Yeah, I get that. So, and what was this individual's name, the serial killer?
Sean Gillis.
And is that SEAN or SHAW?
Yeah, SEANGILLIS. And it was him and Derek Todd Lee. I think he did about 18. They matched him with DNA to about 11.
In which case did you work cases on both of them, or
no? I just worked the Gillis case. Gillis was, and it was Gillis basically concentrated. He was a killer of opportunity. If he had females that were either alone, or in this case, the lady had her card broken down. He gave her a ride, and it's very strange because he gave her a ride. He gave her a ride to a 7-Eleven, and she went into the store and told the clerk that she didn't feel comfortable with this guy, but she knew him, and she went out with him and left. And then we find her a month later. They did they put the clerk under hypnosis, and they were able to get a description of him. So we knew Gillis was a thin male white, long hair. So we knew it wasn't Derek Todd Lee because he was a male black. So it disturbed me. I carried that case for a long time, since it was an unsolved, and it wasn't until it had to be 10 years later. I was in Fort Wayne Police Department at that point. I was working with the police department, and they contacted me about it and let me know about their findings and what they believe was going on.
For sure, yeah. So I think that how would you feel about spending time just discussing those cases? I feel like, I think we could absolutely give time for you to talk about the novels that are coming out and things like that. But for me, what I'm interested in learning about, but obviously I want you to feel like I want you to feel like you're getting what you're coming for, which is to say what you have to say. But I'm super interested in these cases. Like, these are the things that goes on behind the scenes that people just don't think about, and that's absolutely what one of the purposes that I had in mind, the intentions that I had in mind by doing this.
Let me grab a book real quick. I'm gonna show you.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
This is called "I've Been Watching You." It's all about Derek Todd Lee and somewhat about Sean Gillis. It's written by Susan Mustafa, Mustafa, and Tony Clayton. They're special prosecutors. What really ties me to this too is my best friend when I was growing up was a guy by the name of Ray Day. he became a detective with a smaller town here in Baton Rouge. Oh, I'm sorry, in Louisiana called Baker, Louisiana. He became a detective, and he knew Derek Todd Lee just from growing up and from knowing that he was a bad seed.
Yeah.
And he started investigating when the homicide started. He started looking into it, and so he hit the ground running. So he was the one, and East Baton Rouge Sheriff's detective. The two of them worked this case until they were able to get to a point where DNA, in particularly, got specific enough where they were able to tie Derek to, I think it was 11 out of 18 of the homicides victims, and was able to get him convicted on it.
Just purely out of the DNA.
DNA, they had descriptions of him. He never confessed, just like Gillis. Gillis never confessed to anything. They had to do their due diligence to make sure that they were able to prosecute him. And when they did, they got multiple life sentences. I believe Gillis is still locked up. Lee, he developed some kind of medical issue, ended up going to a hospital about 2 or 3 years ago and ended up dying.
Are these any of these featured on any like true crime documentaries or anything like that?
I'm absolutely sure. Yeah, if you look up on particularly Derek Todd Lee, he was such a. I mean, he was very blatant. He would go into someone's house, grab a woman that was in the house, and then they would find her body 100 miles away in a Chapelai Basin. And he was just. And what really brought things to attention was, I think it was the Secretary of Agriculture. His wife was one of the victims, and he was the Louisiana State Secretary. So it really heightened law enforcement to kick in gear and find out who this guy was. So now a lot of those things, a lot of things that happened, I wasn't involved in because I was in Indiana at the time, and the actual solving and all was done by Ray Day and the other detectives. And then they contacted me afterwards and said, "Hey, you might want to know about this." I was involved at the beginning and then found out about it later on. But I was a detective there, so I ended up working several cases. We had a serial burglar, things like that. And a lot of things too, and some things that I'm learning too, working at the state capitol. I studied that different type of criminals, like you have assassins, you have serial killers, you have spree killers, you have mass murderers. And what their mentality or what their psychological profile is when it comes to trying to figure out what each person, their motivation. And working here at the state capitol, I'm not sure, where are you located?
I'm in Kentucky.
Huey Long was a governor here in the 1930s, and then he became a state senator, and he was assassinated there in the state capitol. He was assassinated by a doctor by the name of Carl Weiss, or that's what the findings were. However, when you start studying Carl Weiss, you find out he does not fit any of the profile of being an assassin. And the more I look at it and interview people, I actually had a conversation with a woman last month who is the great niece of Carl Weiss's widow. So that was her. So she had all the letters and all the correspondence and everything between the two. And she gave me some information that really kind of floored me, but it makes sense about what happened during the shooting of Huey Long. And I personally do not believe that Carl Weiss is the assassin. And that's going down the line. That's another book I'm working on, but I'm not working on the assassination part. Huey Long was a socialist, and he was running. He's going to run for president against Franklin Roosevelt in 1936. My take on it is I'm writing the Huey Long presidency. What the United States would have been like under a socialist,
under an alternative history.
Right?
Yeah,
exactly. So he would be in charge of the United States when you had Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin and Franco and all these Marxist, socialist, communists. He would have been of like-minded. Would there have been a war in Europe, or would it have been totally different? And so that's right now I'm doing research, not only on getting into the mindset of Huey Long, but also everything that surrounded all the history up until that point, and then where it diverges. And I don't know if you've ever heard the term faction, which is fact mixed with fiction. In Strawberry Concrete, the majority of the book that takes place in the 60s is factual. I went through and researched everything I could. I did almost 2 years of research just to make sure that what I put in was factual, and then followed up on it. It's the same thing with Huey Long. Everything that will be in there, even though Long himself would be a fictional character, because obviously he was dead, so I'd have to write what he would have done if he hadn't died. But all the people that he would be interacting with, their lives still continued. So how I'm going to intermingle their lives with Huey Long, people like Elliot Ness, who was he had already arrested Al Capone, and now he had moved on to the director of public safety in Cleveland, Ohio, and he had worked with the FBI, and Melvin Purvis, who J. Edgar Hoover didn't care for because he was so popular as an FBI agent. He caught Melvin Karpus and Pretty Boy Floyd and all of these 30s gangsters, and he made a name for himself. And when he didn't get promoted to number 2 in the FBI because Hoover disapproved of him, he quit. So these are people that I'm able to bring in to the story that are actual folks and what they actually did, and be able to bring them in to fill out the storyline that would be what if,
For sure.
So it's
That's
fun.
I think that's a very interesting concept. What I want to talk kind of like the shift from law enforcement to writing. But what made that? What brought that about?
9/11.
Okay.
I was in Fort Wayne, and I had been away for 10 years at that point, and I hadn't gone home much, and so it was just pretty much my wife and I up in Fort Wayne. And when 9/11 happened, I started feeling homesick and started getting in touch with all my old friends, calling them and Facebooking them, and and seeing what they were up to. And I got in touch with an old girlfriend, and we had broken up back when I was 18, 19 or whatever. And when we broke up, we decided that we were going to meet at Shoney's and decide what we were going to do. So, and this was through an intermediate, somebody who gave me a note saying, hey, so-and-so wants to meet you at Shoney's, be there at what time and everything. So I showed up, and I waited for 2.5 hours, and she never showed up. So I took that as that's how it's going to be. So I moved on with my life and didn't think anything about it. So I got in touch with her, and she had been married and she had had children and everything like that. So just seeing how things were. And then we kind of got quiet there for a minute, and she said, I waited for you for 3 hours. And I said, no, you didn't. I waited for you for 2.5. She said, where were you? And I was at one Shoney's and she was at another Shoney's. And she said, if you had showed up, I had decided I was going to marry you. But since you didn't show up, I figured that was my sign. So I went on with my life. And so we sat there and, figured we could have been married for, 20 years or whatever at this point. So I took that, and I had that case of the serial case, and I started crafting a storyline where I intermingled the two. And basically the detective investigates a serial killer in Louisiana in the 80s and early 90s, and they catch the guy, but he's not real comfortable with how the department did it, and so he leaves. He quits, and he goes to work for a department in Indiana. Now, the department in Indiana is called Camp Simmons in Indiana. So it's a fictional place, but it's based on, I had a partner in Baton Rouge with the sheriff's office. He worked in narcotics, and I went to crime scene, and he was killed in a drug raid. And his name was Jerry Simmons. So I named the town Camp Simmons after him. Yeah. So he's working in this town, and he's in charge of a special crimes unit now. He's worked his way up to a lieutenant. And then right out of the blue, he gets a phone call from his old department that says, hey, you're the only person who knows anything about this, that he's back. The killer is back. And you think you could come down here and kind of give us some pointers on what happened before. So he has to go back and revisit what happened. One of his victims, this serial killer's victim, I call him the barber, was his fiance. So the detective's fiance was one of his victims. He has to drag up all the old ghosts and everything and confront his past to try and find this guy. So, and In the course of it, he ends up running into an old girlfriend, and then that story comes up in the story about it. It took me, it was a really long book. It was like 600 pages. So I ended up dividing it into 2 books and then putting a bridge in between the 2 and dividing it for, say, it's about 12-year gap.
Okay.
So that's how it got me into writing.
Yeah. So what, can you fill me in kind of like what happened between you and your first wife?
Well, I've been married 3 times. Okay. My first wife passed. She had an undiagnosed heart condition. So I immediately got remarried. I had 2 sons from my second wife. They're now 20 and 19, and they live, or at least they're in Georgia with their mom. And then they're both going to college up there. And then after we were only together for about 5 years, and then I remarried and was with my third wife for about 11, well, almost 13 years. It would have been 13 years this year. And we decided to go into the medical field, and I helped her go through it. Once she got her nursing degree, she decided to leave. So I stayed, and at that point, I was in Fort Wayne for 23 years, and I was in Cincinnati for 3 years, and I was in Nashville for 8 years. And at that point, I just decided I want to come home. So I was gone for about 34 years and decided to come back. And got this job at the Capitol, which is one of my favorite places in the world.
So what is your, remind me, I know you've said it, but what is your job title right now?
It's security agent, actually Senate security agent. My job is we have the sergeant of arms who watches the internal security chamber. I'm sorry, the Senate chamber. And we are basically stationed outside the chamber. So we deal a lot when it comes to the public personnel, people come through. And we've had several things that happened. Like I say, Huey Long was assassinated there. There was a bomb in the Senate chamber placed in 1970, blew up the chamber, and no one was hurt. But one of the curious things is a pencil was, when the thing exploded, there's a pencil that's jammed up into the ceiling, and everyone wants to see the pencil. All the school kids, we get groups of kids there and all that. So everyone wants to see the pencil. It's a big thing. And then the Capitol itself is the tallest state capitol in the United States. Lincoln, Nebraska was building a capitol very much like ours. They started building it in 1922 and they finished it in 1932. Well, Huey Long, who was the governor, said, "Hold my beer. Let me show you how it's done." And he had our capitol built in 14 months for $5 million in 1930. They opened in 1931. And it's a showplace. I mean, it has so many, the walls and the ceilings have all these intricate paintings, and the doors are all carved. The doors weigh 1,000 pounds apiece, and they're solid brass, and they have inlay cut into them. And it's a lot of artistic work. And to make sure that it was the tallest, he ended up adding 50 feet to the top of our Capitol to make sure it was the tallest one. So Huey was very much involved in it. And there are certain little things that we point out. We point out the assassination. There's still bullet holes in the wall from where there were like 60 shots fired at the yeah. So there were ricochets everywhere. And there are other little things that we point out to people, and they just love that sort of thing. So that's primarily what we do now. But when the Senate comes in session, which will be March to June, then we up our game. We're suit and tie, but we're armed. We're all trained. We're all police officer standard training, post certified. So everyone there pretty much is law enforcement. And when that happens, we are stationed inside the chamber. We're the only ones that are allowed to be armed in there. The sergeant of arms is not allowed. Other police agencies, officers, they have to call 24 hours before to get clearance to be able to carry their weapon into the chamber. But we're situated in 4 different contact points, and it's open to the public. So you have a gallery on both sides, and then an overhead gallery that people can watch the session. You're stationed there to make sure that there's any kind of disruption or anything like that. We physically move them out, and it's okay to protest if you want to protest, but you can't disrupt the chamber. And there's certain decorum that you have to maintain. So we move in and we take care of situations.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what weapon? What's your weapon of choice or assigned weapon?
Glock 17, which is what I
Okay.
carried when I was in Fort Wayne. We carried Glock 17, and
Okay.
then I have a 26, little Glock 26, little
All right.
pocket Glock that when I'm working, I'm vested up. I've got my
Yeah.
gun, I've got my backup, and I'm just
So do they hire you all, like, is it like a security contracting agency, or is this like a state funded position?
we work for the state of Louisiana.
Yeah.
So the Senate president is the one who actually approves our hiring. We have to go through background check. We have to, federal background check. We have to go through state background check. In my case, I had to go through Tennessee, Louisiana, Cincinnati, or Ohio, Indiana. So they had to do background checks on all of that, and then they make the decision whether or not. And it's very, very laid back. I mean, for the most part, it's a PR job. It's very low key. But when we're on our job, we have to be on our job. We have to be on our toes.
Absolutely.
I mean, sometimes we
Yeah.
get to 7 a.m. and we don't leave until midnight.
Yeah,
So
I can imagine. I know it's I'm not personally familiar, but I mean I'm aware enough of, I guess you could say, politics and congressional,
right.
how would you I don't even know the correct terminology. With what the areas that you're describing, I'm familiar enough to know, like, there's not always a set schedule, so you never
Right.
really know.
We don't work hourly. We don't work an hourly wage. We're paid per diem. So no matter how
Okay.
many hours we work, we still get paid the same. So we may work 4 hours. Usually on the weekends, we only work 4 hours unless it's in session. But we may end up working 8 hours, 12 hours, whatever, and it's still the same rate of pay. And then you have the House. So we have the Senate, then you have the House. There's so much, I don't want to say animosity, but there is a different mindset in the House. So we don't handle anything that has to do with the House. They have their own security, and we do security for the Senate. They do security for the House, but then we also have a tactical squad that works there. So if something does go down, we have our own SWAT team. We have K9. We have people that are there that will respond immediately to take care of any kind of crowd disruption or a hostage situation or a tactical situation. We're able to maintain until the tactical unit gets there, then we back up and it falls to them.
Sure. So how much time do you have?
I got all night.
Okay. I say we just roll with this and see what we get. So I think we're covering some good stuff, and might as well just keep rolling with it. And so talk a little bit about, like, the training, I don't know if they have like a selection, what's the job requirements and hiring process like for the job you're in right now?
It's really not that difficult. They look mainly for law enforcement, people with prior law enforcement, and mainly post certification, police officer standard training. When I was with Sheriff's Office in Baton Rouge, I was post certified. Then I went to Indiana and was ILEA, Indiana Law Enforcement Academy certified. I was that for 23 years. And then to maintain my certification after I retired, we had to do yearly qualifications to maintain our certification. And then after being in Nashville, I had pretty much lost my certifications. Then when I came back to Baton Rouge, I initially was hired with one of the hospital systems here, of one of the major hospital systems. And we had to go through post certification then. So I had to qualify and had to test to get my post certification back. Once I got that, I had applied with the Capitol, and I was at the hospital for not quite a year. And they contacted me and asked me if I wanted to come work for them. I'm like, I'm there, So I was able to take that post certification with me there. And then we qualify at least once. They're upping it to 2 times a year when it comes to weapons qualification. So it's we stay on top of it. I mean, since the guys are older, they're retired. Don't know. I'm about mid-age for them. I'm 65. So we have some that are older. We have some that are younger. But it's mostly a laid back job. Like I said, a lot of it is PR. A lot of it is just being nice to people and just talking about what goes on in the Capitol and all that. So, but when it comes to going into session, you really get more hard boiled. Most of us knew what it was like to be a cop back when you could be a cop, like we were talking today about one thing that really aggravates me more than anything is when you see these videos where you have someone begging and begging and begging someone for their driver's license or to step out of the car, and you're telling them, 5-10 times, and okay, I'm gonna only tell you this one more time, and then they tell you another 10 times and all. With us, it was ask them, tell them, move them. You ask someone politely, you may ask them a second time, then you tell them this is what you're going to do. If they do not, then you move them. It's just, everyone's afraid of civil liability. Everyone's afraid of the video camera because you only see one half of it. So I understand. I'm just glad I'm not working the streets now, since I was brought up in a totally different era where you did police work. And sorry if I hurt your feelings, but that's just the way it is.
I think there's, I think there was good intention behind, trying to maintain form of accountability. It can swing, the pendulum can swing too far. And so it sounds like that's kind of where you fall on that. And I understand that. So one question I did have, so like you talked about being in Nashville and you said that your certifications kind of lapsed. So like what goes into maintaining certifications?
Basically, you have to qualify at least once a year, depending upon what we were doing with our jobs. I worked for AT&T. So I was contracted to AT&T. So my job was to protect the road crews. And we did a lot of things like directing traffic and stuff like that. But then in 2020, when they had the bombing, we had to up our game. So our uniforms looked like Nashville PD, other than our patches were different. We were, I won't say deputized, but we were more able to do more when it came to enforcement before that, because they really saw how vulnerable the people were, and they wanted us to be able to protect them. So a lot of us had, some of the guys, they carried their ARs in the car. I had my 870, if something happened, we were ready to roll with it. But we just had to qualify. But after being away, I've been away for 10 years, and there are a couple of times when I hadn't qualified. So when you do that, it lapses. So I it just wasn't something I was able to do at the time. So I didn't, and then my qualification lapsed. So when I came back here, that was one of the first things I was looking to do, is to get back into recertification. I could still carry a weapon because I had a retired police commission. I had a letter from the chief saying that I had permission to carry a weapon. So I still carry it everywhere. I have insurance to a company that protects security officers, so that if something happens, they're there. You don't say anything, you call us, we have attorneys, and they take care of everything. So I signed up for that, and I wanted to, made sure that I was covered with that. Working at the hospital, it was an interesting thing because we dealt with a lot of psych patients and a lot of brutality, a lot of violence when it came to having to deal with mental patients and things. Plus, bringing in the victims and things. You had gunshot victims, stabbing victims. You had to maintain lockdown and make sure that obviously you would have the police department or you'd have the sheriff's office working the investigation, but we were tasked with keeping everything else away from them so they could do what they needed to do. And we would deal with family members and friends and all the hubbub that would come with people bringing stuff in there. And so we had to be hardcore about it, and not allow things into the hospital and have to deal with people when it came to
So it sounds like there's just a lot of experiences in different environments, and I think that I would call that a successful career, and whether it was under an official badge or not, like I get it seems like that type of career seems to be your fit, and so it seems like you've done really well with that. Can you talk a little bit about, could we talk about your uncle? Remind me. So that was the Bell Tower, Kennedy, and then there was
the Howard Johnson.
Yeah.
Howard
so
Johnson.
Start with, Kennedy or the Bell Tower?
He started with Austin Police Department in 1955.
Yeah.
About 1958, he applied for government service. He was hired by the Treasury Department, and part of the Treasury, Secret Service falls under that. So he was appointed to the Secret Service in 60 when Kennedy was sworn in. So he was there for 60 until 63, actually till 65. So he was there under Kennedy and spent time in Germany, where he traveled, and a lot of the White House duties was to travel with the president, go to different things. Now, he was not in Dallas when it happened. He was on the advance team in Austin. He grew up in Austin, Texas, and Lyndon Johnson had a ranch there in Austin, Texas, and he was a state senator, and he wasn't the nicest guy. Okay, he was a bully. He's a big guy. He used to do what they call the Johnson treatment, where he would like get this close to you, and then he would just kind of lord over you, and he would just intimidate you with his size. There was also the other point of Johnson treatment. I'm sorry, you there?
It cut out. It's cut out for a second. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yep. Okay. Switch networks.
Coming back. You were talking about
he would do what,
and he would get in your face.
Yeah, get in your face. But the other Johnson treatment was much more gross than that. He would have senators and congressmen and people he didn't like. He would have them come into the Oval Office. He'd go into the bathroom. He'd use the bathroom there and make them stand there while he would berate them. And it was just a show of power with him. When he took over the White House, they really didn't get along because he had known Johnson, and he didn't like the way he worked. So he left the Secret Service and he went back to Austin Police Department. And he went to Austin in 65. So when he was in Austin in 66, he was working in the Detective Bureau when Whitman had, now a couple things about Charles Whitman. Whitman had, when he was at he was in the Marine Corps and had gone to University of Texas on a officer candidate school scholarship. So while he was there, he ended up poaching a deer, gutted it in his dorm room, and he was arrested and charged with poaching. So he lost his scholarship, and they ended up sending him back to Camp Lejeune. Now, when he was at Lejeune, he was in all kind of trouble. He was running a loan shark business where he would have Marines come in, borrow $20. You have to pay me back 25. If you don't, you'll pay for it. So the ones who didn't, and Whitman was a big boy, he'd whoop up on them. So he ended up being charged with loan sharking. He had a weapon on the base and usury, and spent 90 days in the brig there. So when he got out, he went out drinking one night, and as he was coming home, 5 of the Marines who he had scuffed up before, they cornered him in an alley and they beat him to flinders. They kicked him repeatedly in the head to the point that he was hospitalized for about 2 weeks. Yeah. And then after that, he started developing headaches, and said his whole behavior changed. So he was able to stick it out for a little while longer, but then he got a discharge. When he went back to Austin, his whole behavior changed. Him and his wife, he became very brutal with her. And he was writing a journal, and in the journal, he was talking about all these different feelings he was having. And one of the things that he was having nightmares about was about shooting people from an elevated position. Mm-hmm. And he talked to one of the psychiatrists on the campus about it, and he kind of blew it off and said, well, that's something soldiers think about, and it's nothing you really need to worry about. Well, he had never seen combat, and it stayed with him. So he got to a point where he got really violent with his wife, and in one of his letters that he wrote, in letters in his journal, he mentioned Maria Oswald, where the press really went after her after Lee Harvey was killed with assassination. So he did not want that. He knew what he was going to do, and he did not want that to happen to his family. So he killed his wife and his mother so that they did not have to suffer the indignity of wife had to endure when Carl Weiss was accused of killing Huey Long in 1935. After that, she went back to get her college degree and went to LSU. They refused to accept her. because LSU was Huey Long's baby. He basically put LSU on the map. And they had the Huey Long Field House and all this named after him, and refused to allow her to attend college there. So she ended up having to go elsewhere. Whitman, when he went up to the tower, he had a Foot Locker filled with weapons and canteen and food and everything, and he was up there for about 2 hours and just shot everything that moved, and he was hitting things a mile and a half away.
Really?
So, yeah, there was an electrician that was working on a power line, shot him, shot a child off a bicycle, pregnant woman. I mean, I think there were 17 that were killed. Mm-hmm. So the police finally stormed the tower and they killed him. And one of the things they found was a letter he had written that said, I don't know why I'm doing all these things, but after I'm gone, can you do an autopsy to see if there's something going on in my brain? Well, sure enough, they found he had a tumor on his frontal lobe, about the size of an almond. Yeah. So they don't know if that was the actual cause, but they look back at that beating that he received.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And they felt that that's what caused his behavioral change and caused him to do that. So,
you talked about beforehand, though, that he had essentially smuggled the deer into his dorm to gut. You said gut it, but he got into kind of some loan sharking and things like that. So now the deer, I'm not saying like I find that acceptable, but that's kind of like maybe like a socially gray area, whereas the loan sharking, that gets into the kind of like the antisocial stuff. So did he have any tendencies before, like any other tendencies, and then it just got exacerbated by these?
Not really. He was considered a good Marine. He was a great shot. He was an expert shot, and he was personally selected to go through the officer candidate school. He was actually assigned to Gitmo, and he was in Gitmo in 1959, I think it was. And so he ended up going, I think he was there for a couple of years, and then he got the offer to go to UT for the scholarship. Now, one thing about when I was writing the book is that's factual. You can Google that and you can find about Whitman and the gutting the deer and all that. But nowhere does it say where he shot the deer or where he got the deer from. So the gray area there is where I put the fiction in. So in the story, he took it off of Lyndon Johnson's ranch. So I have the two of them meet in the story. Now, I don't know if they ever met, but in the story it does. So Whitman was said he was killed. He had killed his family beforehand. Then in the so he was there and he worked the crime scenes. Now, of course, this is before you had all the CSI stuff and all that. He basically collected the shell casings, took photographs of everything. There were some photos that were released in a Life magazine right after that. I think some of his photos ended up being in Life magazine about that. So
your uncle's photos?
Yeah. So if
you could send me those, if you could acquire those and send them my way, I'd love to.
I've been looking for that copy. I found a copy of it. Oh gosh, I don't know. I was in Indiana, and I found a copy of it and I mailed it to him, and for like a birthday present or something. And I haven't been able to find one since, and I've been Googling it, trying to see if I can find a copy, but I'll see what I can do. Because it's something that, now, what also ties it back to me and where I'm working, in 1975, they made a movie about the Texas Tower, about the sniper. Kurt Russell played Charles Whitman, and they used the Louisiana State Capitol as the tower. Because this is only 9 years after the fact. So you still had, family members and people there in Austin, and it was too fresh for them. So they used the state capitol as the Texas Tower, and it was all filmed at Baton Rouge. And my uncle was a technical advisor on the movie. So I was down there every day with my Bell and Howell movie camera and filming scenes. And well, it's kind of funny because
I realized I never got your uncle's name.
Frensley. I'm sorry. Yeah. Theodore Frensley. Frensley. Tom Frensley, not Ted. Ted is the name of my character in the book. His name is Ted Fielding, but Thomas Frensley is my uncle.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if am I going to be able, Can you, as far as like his stuff, and then some maybe like
the
your
problem I have,
documentation, are you able to send me just so that I have like
I can
good
send
personal
you his.
verification?
I could send you his pictures of him in what Austin PD. He didn't have
Yeah.
any photos when he was with the White House, and he is a dementia patient now, so I really have no contact. He doesn't.
No, I no, completely understand.
Yeah, I can. I'll
I
definitely
want to
send
do
you.
my due diligence, and so that's wild that he was in proximity to those
Right.
situations. Any other family members in law that you have in law enforcement?
No, I'm the only one. He was. When I was growing up, when the tower happened, I was 6. When the assassination happened, I was 3. My mom has a picture of me sitting on a bucket in my diaper at 3 years old watching Kennedy's funeral and pointing out the horse, because when they had the horse with the boots turned backwards as they were leading it out. But when at 6 years old, Adam 12, Batman, those were, crime fighters. Those were my role models. And my uncle, when Bobby Kennedy was killed in 68, he was very upset about it. But I think he kind of understood that was going to happen, because he had a talk with me when I was about 14 or 15 years old. And he said, I'm going to tell you some things. And you believe him or not, he said, but I'm going to tell you. And he said, all right, Lyndon Johnson killed Kennedy. He said, and I'll tell you why. And then he started breaking down these different things. And Johnson was a believer in what he called the Kennedy dynasty. He believed that JFK be president for 8 years, Bobby for 8 years, and possibly Teddy for 8 years. So we're looking at 24 years of Kennedys, and he'd never lived to see the presidency. He also didn't believe, and that's been, and all this stuff I've verified just by research, that he was not going to be on the 64 ticket, that Kennedy was going to select someone else because he was carrying some baggage that would have been detrimental to his campaign. The whole reason
LBJ was carrying baggage.
The whole reason he even had LBJ as his running mate is because he was a blue blood liberal from Massachusetts that didn't appeal to the South. So he needed someone from the South. So he pulled Johnson to make the ticket, to be able to pull the South and the North together. And it worked. Johnson also adamantly suggested that Kennedy go to Dallas because he felt that it was necessary for the campaign. This is 63. November, the president re-election was coming up real soon. So now, about a month before, Adlai Stevenson, who was an advisor in Kennedy's White House, went to Dallas and was attacked. You had a lot of anti-Kennedy sentiment there, and it was not safe. They even had wanted for treason posters of Kennedy posted around there. So it was not a good idea, but he promoted it mainly because he was needed that. He needed to show that he still had power and that he could get Kennedy to do things. In 62, he went to South Vietnam on behest of Kennedy and was talking with them about what he wanted, the South Vietnamese, what they needed from the United States to help them against the North Vietnamese. And they said, we need troops, we need equipment, we need whatever you have. Well, when he brought that back to Kennedy, Kennedy was very hesitant to get into Vietnam because he didn't want to get involved in the Civil War. The thing is, Lyndon Johnson's wife, Lady Bird Johnson, sat on the board of directors of Bell Huey helicopters. So if you have a war, who are you going to send? So he was set to make millions of dollars.
It's funny how vice presidents with we'll say very unique types of contract opportunities come out with that,
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. And then I find this out, which was I really had to dig for it. But November 22nd, 1963 at 1:00, a Senate subcommittee was opening up an investigation on Lyndon Johnson, on voter fraud and some other improprieties. There was the Texas Secretary of Agriculture, guy by the name of Marshall, investigating Johnson, and committed suicide by shooting himself 5 times with a rifle in his front yard. And it eventually went to the federal government, and they were beginning to open up an investigation on Johnson.
What
You
was
know,
the
they talk
gentleman's
about.
name?
I'm sorry, his name
Just
was. I think his name was Henry Marshall.
Henry
Was
Marshall.
the Secretary of Agriculture of Texas, and there was a guy by the name of Billy Souls Estes, who was a compatriot of Johnson, who was involved in a lot of illegal activities, right along with a guy by the name of Mac Wallace, who many believe was actually involved in the assassination. Now, he was also involved in a homicide in Austin, where a guy who ran a putt-putt golf, he was killed in a robbery, and Wallace was found guilty for it, but then was sentenced basically to no time. He didn't serve any time on it. So, they talk about the certain political families that have people that are tied to them, murders and things. Yeah.
Sure.
Johnson had.
I'd rather you not name them because I don't want my name associated with those names. But
yeah. Johnson had about 10 or 12 people directly tied to him, including his own sister, Josepha, who died under mysterious circumstances that were detrimental to his political career, and they ended up dying. So he was looking, with this investigation, he was looking to be either prosecuted or impeached. Either way, he's not going to be on the ticket in 64. 12:30 that same day, Kennedy's killed, goes away. No one ever hears anything about it. Investigation's closed. Yeah. So as a detective, one thing I look for is motive, method, opportunity. He had all three in Dallas. And he also had the compatriots, because when the Bay of Pigs happened, everything blew up in the administration's face. And Kennedy had called in Allen Dulles, who was in charge of CIA, and just basically said, when I'm reelected, I'm gonna tear the CIA down to its bare bones, throw it from the east as far as from the west, and I'm gonna rebuild it, and you are out of a job. Dulles was a big Johnson supporter when he was running for president. Dulles ended up being on the Warren Commission after the assassination, determining on who was involved. And he was one of the main proponents behind the single assassin theory. So he had the CIA supporting him. And he
allegedly
he did. But that's one of the things when Strawberry Concrete, when the original publisher went under, I pulled the book, and then all the JFK files came out. So I started just going through them, reading everything I could, and finding something that I could relate to the story. I updated the book with different things from it, not a whole lot, but just small things that related directly to the story and was factual, and then re-released it.
I think, what you're describing as, it sounds like you're describing LBJ as obviously political motivations. That's seems to always be the driving factor in the conspiracy theories with his involvement with JFK's assassination. I think, though, that what I haven't heard until what you talked about is really possibly just being more purely political, just wanting to be to have that shot of presidency or to be president. Whereas, that's at the heart of all of them, but it's of all the conspiracy theories, but there seems to be a lot more added. Like, I think about the JFK movie or Oliver Stone, there seems to just be so much overbearing, heavy-handed narrative, but this just sounds like I want to be president, and these guys are in my way. And honestly, that's very simple. And it seems like when things are true, it's usually the simplest narratives that come out as being true. So I appreciate that take on it for sure.
They did an interview. I can never remember this guy's first name. His last name was Breslin, a journalist. It did a sit-down interview over drinks with Richard Nixon, and I've got the video saved. And he asked him point blank, who killed Kennedy?
Yeah.
He said Nixon was very quiet for a minute. And Nixon said, well, I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
We both wanted to be president, but I wasn't willing to kill anyone for it.
Yeah.
That's all he said. So, even he was aware of what was going on. But you have to think, too, but it really backfired on him, because he was president from 63, 68, and then he didn't run again because once he got Vietnam going, he really got in over his head. And he realized that, when you have people standing outside the White House daily chanting, hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids have you killed today? And everywhere he went, he was being confronted with protesters and all. The war, he may have profited from it, but it's like the old scripture about gaining the world but losing your soul.
Right.
He did.
Murdered his reputation.
Right. And he did not want to do it anymore. So he gave up the election of 68, turned it over to Bobby Kennedy and Richard Nixon. And of course, what happened with Bobby. So I think he bit off more than he could chew when it came to that, and didn't realize what a quagmire that Vietnam had become and how it was so devastating to the country. And that's why he didn't want to do more. So
can you share a little bit? It seems like more recently, the view on Nixon is not exactly popular, but it's not as negative as it was. It's almost the people look back and see a lens of manipulating the narrative, even with him. So are you able to speak on that? Like, do you feel like knowledgeable enough to talk about what went on with him?
I really don't feel, I mean, I have my own opinion because of some things that have come up recently, that they are feeling more that Nixon was more of a scapegoat, and he had more.
Yes, I think that's ringing the bell for me, as it was kind of a scapegoatish situation.
And it boiled down to, he was a man of integrity, because, you had Truman said the buck stops here, but Nixon showed that. He said, whatever happened, I'm responsible. I will take it. And if that means my resignation, then that's what I'm going to do for the good of the country. So he was, if you look at it from that point of view, he was more patriotic American, to put America first over dragging it out through a long trial or making it all about him. He decided that, okay, fine, I'll take this, let the country go on, let it heal, let it do what it needs to be do, and I'll be the whipping boy. And I think Nixon was always, when he was vice president, and then when he ran against Kennedy, they talk about how when they did the debate, they felt that Kennedy won the television debate in the public opinion, but Nixon won the radio debate, because it was in black and white. And when you looked at him, here's Kennedy, this young, dapper, and he's very articulate, and then he's talking. And then when the camera would go to Nixon, it's like he was just sweating and pale and just looked like he was frightened the whole time. But when you listen to it on the radio, Nixon was very powerful, and he brought his message, and he made sure that what he was saying came across in a very articulate and very accepting way, while Kennedy kind of meandered, but he had his way about him and his look and everything about him, and was he for the longest time always felt like he was the underdog, and that he that people always saw him as something that he wasn't. I think he kind of had a little bit of a persecution complex, but he was, he, like I say, I have to go back to, he was man enough to stand up, take responsibility, and resign, whether he felt that was 100% right or not for him, but he felt that it was 100% right for the country. And put country before self. To me, that's a patriot.
Sure, absolutely. I think that's if that is the case, I mean, that's at the very least a respectable move.
Right.
But I'll tell you, if you're good, I feel like we've covered quite a bit. And what I would like to do is ask that, if you could just email me whatever. Sure. Just, in the military, we have like a DD-214, but just some kind of service, just so that I would be doing my due diligence to verify you. And then obviously I know your uncle, you just have photos, but I'll work with what we have. And then I'd like to just, as long as the quality is good, I didn't intend to use Google Meet. I was more of the backup, but
sure,
as long as the quality is good, I think I can edit this and make it a decent little episode. I'm not, this will be the first virtual episode of the podcast. So I'm learning how to do this as I go. You know, that's part of being an average Joe. Yeah.
I'm learning. I just got a microphone set and everything because I'm working on doing an audio book for
Yes.
Strawberry Concrete. So you talk about learning curve.
Yes.
Getting to to do that. So if I'm start getting proficient with that, then I'll be able to do my books and then maybe branch out and help others.
Yeah, it was very nice talking to you, man. And I tell you what, just what we've talked about, just send it in an email, and also send me your address because I'd like to send something your way just out of appreciation.
Okay. Certainly.
Yeah,
I'll get you. I just ordered some Fort Wayne PD patches.
All
so
right.
I'll get one of the patches, and I'll send you a Challenger coin from.
That'd be great. That would be great. All right. Well, thank you for hopping on. God bless you. Thank you for working through the audio glitching and internet. Technology is always going to have its limitations.
Yep. All right. Well, it's a pleasure. It is really a pleasure.
Take care, and I hope you have a good week and stay average.
All
That's my new stay average. All right.
Take care, Brandon. All right. Bye-bye.